So if you're looking to get into home bartending, but you haven't made your very first cocktail yet, then the most important thing that you can do is to get started and make that very first cocktail as soon as possible. And I feel very qualified to speak about this because for those of you that don't know, my name is Ron Virpin. I'm a full-time medical doctor and I've been home bartending for nearly 6 years now. And during that time, I've learned how to make close to 150 different cocktail recipes and I've thrown about 60 cocktail parties. And although my story did start about 6 years ago in June 2020 when I made my very first cocktail, my story, I think of it as actually starting probably 5 to 6 years before that, because during that previous 5 to 6 years, 2014, 15 onwards until I made my first cocktail in 2020, I had thought about getting into bartending at least 2 or 3 different times. And I always made different excuses. I was still a college student at the time. I was in medical school. I was focused on studies. I was living in dorms. I was moving around a lot. I was living with family. I was living in Airbnbs. I didn't have a car for the entire time. So I always made all of these different excuses about why I couldn't get started. But really, I think all of that is complete BS, because the most important thing that you can do if you're looking to get started with home bartending or really any other hobby, if this is the year you want to get started in home bartending, or you want to learn any type of skill, the most important thing that you can do is to get started as soon as possible, is to make that very first cocktail as soon as possible. And I have a couple of tips that I'm going to give in this video that will help you get started with making that cocktail as quickly as possible. The first is the first thing you want to do when you make your very first cocktail, you want to make sure you have the right tools. And I don't think you need any of this stuff right here if you want to make your very first cocktail. After you make a few cocktails, you want to get invested into home bartending, you really want to commit to the hobby, then go ahead and buy, the shaker and the jigger and the stirring spoon and all this other stuff. But really, you can approximate all of these tools with just simple household items. You could use a regular Tupperware or a mason jar or something like that in place of a shaker, and then you can use a trusted tablespoon to measure your ingredients. A tablespoon you can use in place of a jigger, and you could also use it in place of a stirring spoon or a bar spoon like the one I have here. So with just a Tupperware box and a tablespoon, which essentially everybody has in their own kitchen, you can approximate the tools that you need for essential home bartending. And when it comes to ice, you don't even need any fancy ice cube trays or ice cube makers or anything like that. You can just use your standard ice cube tray that everyone has in their fridge, in their freezer, or just use the standard ice that you get out of your fridge. Just use something like that. So when it comes to tools, you don't have to go out and invest this right away. I would say maybe when you're a month or 3 months into your home bartending journey, you want to invest into high quality tools, go ahead and get something like this. I made my very first cocktail the way that I explained with just those simple tools. I used, my first cocktail was a Negroni, which is a stirred cocktail. I used a tablespoon to both measure the ingredients and to serve as the bar spoon for stirring the ingredients. And then I just used standard ice from a regular basic ice cube tray. And I didn't even have proper glassware. I just used, whatever coffee mug or other regular cup I had around at the time. And I made my Negroni. And then when I was a few months into my journey, I would say I made my very first cocktail in June 2020. 3 months later, in September 2020, that's when I went on the Cocktail Kingdom's website and made a big purchase. I bought the shaker. I bought the jigger previously about a month in on Amazon, but I bought the jigger. I bought the strainer that I have here. I bought the stirring spoon that I have here. And I bought a couple ice cube trays. The core of my whole bartending setup, I bought only 3 months into my journey. I made my very first cocktail without any of the proper bar tools, and you guys can do that too. So if you think you need bar tools, you really don't. You can just use a simple tablespoon as your measuring ingredient or your measuring tool and as your stirring tool. Then you can use something like a mason jar or a shaker, or a mason jar in place of a shaker, or you can use something like a Tupperware in place of a shaker as well. And just for the main approximation, when you're using a tablespoon, the main thing that you want to use is that actual measurement. 1 tablespoon is equal to approximately half an ounce. So you can just extrapolate based on that. So, something like 2 tablespoons is equal to 1 ounce, 4 tablespoons is equal to 2 ounces. So these are some of the more common types of pours that you're going to be doing. So that's how you can use a tablespoon in place of a jigger to measure your different ingredients. So don't think you need the tools. And then when it comes to actually choosing the cocktail, you can just go with something simple. I've made a couple of videos talking about this in some of my previous videos. But if you don't know what cocktail to make as your very first cocktail, just do something like a Daiquri, or choose another classic core template cocktail that only contains 3 or 4 ingredients. So other great examples besides the Daiquri include the Martini, the Old Fashioned, the Margarita, and the Moscow Mule. So any of those 5 cocktails, again, that's Daiquri, Margarita, Moscow Mule, Martini, Old Fashioned. Any of those 5 cocktails will be amazing as your very first cocktail. So really take all the guesswork. You don't have to go thinking and racking your brain about what should be my very first cocktail. Just pick one of those 5. Honestly, just pick whatever your favorite is of those 5. All those 5 cocktails are core template cocktails. They're all contain just 3 or 4 ingredients, and they're all essential to learn, honestly, within your first 3 to 6 months as a home bartender. So just make one of them your very first cocktail. You can even make that your very first 5 cocktails that you'll learn as a home bartender. So that'll really take the guesswork out of it. And then finally, if you don't know the recipe or you don't even know how to make the cocktail, I have made videos on all 5 of those cocktails. All those videos will be linked in the description below. So if you're looking, if you watch this video, you decide, I want to make the margarita my very first cocktail that I learn how to make. I have a Tupperware box. I have a tablespoon to measure my ingredients. I can go out and buy the ingredients, this coming up weekend, get my tequila, lime juice, simple syrup, Cointreau, whatever the ingredients are, get all those things. How do I actually make the margarita? Well, thankfully for you guys, I've made videos on all this. I've been doing YouTube for over a year now, and I've made videos on all 5 of these classic cocktails. I made videos on a ton of other cocktails as well. So whatever your favorite cocktail is, whatever you want to be your first cocktail, just if I haven't already made a video on it, first of all, go search through my channel, try to find that video. But if I haven't already made a video on it, just comment it down below, and then I'll get started as soon as possible on making a video on that specific cocktail. For example, I haven't made things like, I haven't made an espresso martini video, I haven't made a sidecar video, and if that's your favorite cocktail, Brandy Alexander, if something like that is your favorite cocktail, then just go ahead and comment that down below. I'll go ahead and get started as soon as possible on coming up with a video showing you guys how to make that specific cocktail. But luckily for the 5 core cocktails that I mentioned in this video, Daiquri, Margarita, Martini, Old Fashioned, Moscow Mule, I've made videos on all those cocktails before. All those videos will be linked in the description below. And like I said, search through my channel if you want to make some other type of cocktail, and I haven't mentioned that specifically in this video. I probably have made a video on it. I made a video on a lot of different classic cocktails. So just search through my channel and watch that tutorial on how to make that specific cocktail. Then you kind of just put everything together. You go out to the store, you buy those ingredients, and then you put everything together. You measure your ingredients with a tablespoon. You stir it with either the same tablespoon, or you shake it if it's a shaking cocktail with your Tupperware or mason jar. Then you go ahead and there you have it. That's your very first cocktail. And once you do that, you can really call yourself a home bartender. You can say, I finally made a cocktail. I've been thinking about getting into home bartending for years and years and years. I've thought about it. I've made all these excuses. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the space. I didn't have the money. I didn't have a car. Whatever excuses you guys have had, I probably have had even worse excuses or even bigger excuses. And I still got into home bartending. I'm a full-time medical doctor, and I still learn home bartending, completely self-taught. And really the purpose of this channel is to inspire you guys that if you want to get into this hobby, it's a great, amazing hobby. It'll really transform your social life and really transform everything about your life in general. And I can't recommend it enough, but it doesn't happen until you make that very first cocktail, and that'll lead to that momentum. For me, it's led to making cocktails for nearly 6 years now. It's led to me throwing like 50, 60 different cocktail parties. It's led to me learning like 150 different cocktail recipes. It's led to me, reading tons of books on this topic, watching countless hours of YouTube videos on home bartending. And now it's led me to this point where I've made over 125 different videos on home bartending for my YouTube channel. I've been doing this for over a year now, and it's been a really rewarding journey. But it all started with me making that very first cocktail. No tools at all, no prior experience, never taking any bartending classes, none of that stuff. I just got down to the basics, made that very first cocktail, and that's what really started everything going. So if you haven't made your first cocktail yet, if you're really thinking about getting into home bartending, the most important thing that you can do is to just get started. And hopefully in this video, I've laid out a guide for you guys that are thinking about getting into home bartending, so that when you watch this video, you can go out this coming up weekend, your next day or a couple days off, and go out and buy the ingredients and finally make that very first cocktail. And you can finally call yourself a home bartender. And then you can join me on this journey. You can watch the rest of my videos and really learn how to become not only a good beginner home bartender, but then you can progress to intermediate and advanced. And you can join me on this journey and become amazing home bartenders, throw amazing cocktails, build amazing friendships, build the social life, the social circle that you always dreamed of having. It all starts with making that very first cocktail. So please go ahead and get started as soon as possible. Anyways, this is all the advice I have for this video. If you found the advice in this video helpful, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I like to do 2 styles of videos on this channel. The first style video will be a tutorial showing you guys how to make a specific cocktail. That will include the types of videos that will be linked in the description below on how to make cocktails like the Margarita or the Daiquiri and things like that. And the second style video will be like this one, where it's a talking head style. I go over different tips and tricks about home bartending, share things from my own home bartending journey and things like that, do guides on different topics and things that I hope will help you guys become better home bartenders. And finally, if you really want to take home bartending even more seriously, I have a paid community on School.com. That'll be the first link in the description below. Thank you. Cheers.